In our previous lessons, we have been talking about several non-material aspects of culture like language, religion, kingship, dance forms, paintings, and we have been trying to understand how these played a crucial role in the formation and construction of regional cultures. Now it is time to look at a region in specific and understand how these cross currents of several non-material aspects of culture shaped the culture of that region. To be very specific, we will be talking about the cultural traditions of Bengal in this lesson, and we will understand how Bengal has got its culture that it boasts of. Now, Bengal is very prominent and popular for its culture in not just the country but throughout the world. The language and literature, religion, different customs, architectures, paintings that originated in this region continue to have a sustaining and long-lasting influence on the cultural heritage of the country. Now it is imperative on our part to find out how this cultural aspect of this state developed. So we will now try to trace the origin of Bengal's cultural heritage. So let us now begin this very fascinating exploration where we will familiarize ourselves with the cultural traditions of Bengal. Just a while ago we mentioned that the language of a region serves a crucial role in constructing its culture. Now when we talk about the different regions, we presume that the regional languages have been in place since times immemorial. Now when we consider Bengal in this regard, we think that the Bengali language has been spoken by the people of Bengal since long back. But we will be wrong to assume so. This is because early Sanskrit texts that could be dated back to the mid-1st millennium BCE or around 500 BCE suggest that people of Bengal initially did not speak Sanskritic languages. Now this is a very complex idea. We are talking about Bengali as the regional language of Bengal, but from where are Sanskritic languages coming into play? Let us now understand this in greater detail, as in how Sanskritic languages played a very crucial role in the evolution of the language that we know as Bengali today. Since early Sanskritic texts tell us that the language Sanskrit was not spoken by the people of Bengal initially, a very important question comes to the fore. As in, how did Sanskrit make its way to Bengal? How did this language enter and influence Bengal? This happened through the development and the establishment of trade relations. Now you must be wondering that trade relations entail only the exchange of goods and commodities. Now these are things that we generally associate with trade. We talk about all the tangible things that could be traded between two regions. But we will be wrong to assume that only tangible commodities like goods and various other items are the only things that are exchanged in the process of trading. So which other things are exchanged and spread between different regions through this process of trading? Trading entails the exchange of different cultural aspects along with economic exchanges. Now focus on this illustration for the purpose of reference. Here you can see two people from two notably distinct communities are talking between themselves. Now how do we know that these two people are from different communities? This is something that we can tell from the attire of these two people. Now when they are talking and communicating between themselves, their languages will be interchanged and exchanged. So suppose if this person is talking in English and if this person is talking in Hindi, their languages will be exchanged in this process of communication. Now what will they talk about in this process of communication? They will talk about their ways of living. They might talk about the different food items that they consume. So these are different non-material aspects of culture that also get exchanged in the process of communication and trading at large. And it is through the establishment of trade relations that one language from one region spread over different parts. So now let us focus in greater detail how Sanskrit entered Bengal. Between the 4th and 3rd centuries BCE, trade relations developed between Magadha and Vanga, and this is how Sanskrit made its way to Bengal. Now the Guptas spread their influence over the northern and the eastern part of the subcontinent. With this, many new Brahmana settlements were now coming into being. These Brahmanas were very learned and scholarly men. They used to write and read in Sanskrit, and their influence made the proliferation of Sanskrit possible in this region. Sanskrit was a language that originated in the mid-Ganga valley, and through the process of establishment of trade relations, it spread over different parts of the subcontinent. And the settlement of the Brahmanas in Bengal during the Gupta period further facilitated the entry of Sanskrit into Bengal. Because Sanskrit was the traditional language that was used by the Brahmanas. These were all scholarly and learned men who used Sanskrit, and when they started settling in Vanga or Bengal, they brought this language with them to Bengal. Now we get to know about this process of Sanskrit entering Bengal from different foreign accounts. Now foreign accounts of the Chinese traveler Xuanzang give us very important and relevant information as to how Sanskritic languages made their way to Bengal. Earlier on, around 500 BCE, we learned that Sanskrit was not used by the people of Bengal. But these Chinese travelers' accounts that could be dated to 7th century CE tell us that by this time the people of Bengal had already started using Sanskrit and various other Sanskritic languages. Before proceeding with this lesson, let me ask you a question. From which foreign traveler's account do we get testimony of the prevalence of languages related to Sanskrit in Bengal in the 7th century? Do we get to know this from Xuanzang's records or Fahian's records or Ibn Battuta's chronicles or Yuan Tsang's chronicles? Well, the correct answer is Xuanzang. It is from this Chinese travelers' accounts that we get to know about the spread of Sanskrit and different Sanskritic languages over Bengal in and around the 7th century CE. Let us now travel a century ahead and we come to the 8th century CE. Around this time, a very powerful and huge empire spread its control over the northern and eastern part of the subcontinent, and the name of this empire was the Pala Empire. Now, when the Pala Empire extended its control over this region, Bengal started gaining prominence. So it is during the rule of different Pala rulers that Bengal became very prominent and influential in this eastern region of the Indian subcontinent. Now we have to understand that Bengali did not come into being one fine morning. It went series of changes and evolution, and after which Bengali came into being as the language you and I know today. Bengali is said to have evolved from Sanskrit after undergoing many phases of evolution. Now allow me to explain this to you in greater detail. The Pala rulers gave prominence and influence to Bengal. Now the Pala rulers were Buddhists and they were patrons of Sanskrit. So now Sanskrit also gained prominence in Bengal. Now after the Pala rulers, when the different Delhi sultans came to Bengal and spread their power over Bengal, Persia now made its way to Bengal. Now when the Mughal Emperor Akbar conquered Bengal in 1558, he made it the capital of the Bengal Suba. Now, under these different Muslim rulers, Persian was gaining importance in Bengal. But along with that, Bengali was now developing as a regional language. So the point that we understand here is that Sanskrit now started declining and fading out of importance. And what came into being was Bengali that developed as a regional language. Now, when Bengali came into being as a regional language, it took shape after being influenced by several languages. Many tribal words had been incorporated into the Bengali lexicon. But these tribal words were not the only foreign words to be incorporated into the Bengali lexicon, because many Persian words and many European words also found their space in the Bengali vocabulary or lexicon. Now let me give you some examples. Persian was gaining importance as a court language in Bengal when the different Muslim rulers were ruling this region. Now, different Persian words also made their way to the Bengali vocabulary. In this regard, we can consider the example of the word parda. That is a Persian word, but it got incorporated into the Bengali language as parda, which means curtains. Now, there are many other examples. The very word ayna is also a Persian word, but it now got incorporated and added into the Bengali language, and it refers to a mirror. So can you understand how Bengali now continues to carry distinct traces of different words that were rooted in different languages? And needless to mention that the Sanskritic tradition had always had a very heavy influence on the Bengali language. Now, the Bengali language now continues to be spoken in not just West Bengal but throughout the country and in different parts of the world. This is because languages are regional, as we have already discussed, but over time languages transcend the barriers of the regions. When many Bengali people start traveling to different parts of the country or different parts of the world, they carry their own language with them to those new places. And in this way, this language now makes its way to different places of the world. And this holds true for not just Bengali but different languages. Suppose when a Gujarati travels to some other place in not just India but suppose in Europe, that person will be carrying their own language, that is Gujarati, to Europe. So Gujarati, that was initially a regional language, will now transcend not just the barrier of the state but the barrier of the country itself. So in this way, regional languages make their way to different places. Now Bengali, you should remember, is the 7th most spoken language in the world today. It is a very important language in terms of the number of people in the world who speak this language. Now, while we talked about the language and its influence in shaping the culture of a region, we must factor in another aspect, that is literature. Because whenever a language comes into being, after some time literary works are also written and composed in that language. Now when we come to early Bengali literature, we will be able to divide it into several categories. Let us now begin with the first category of Bengali literature, and these literary works were directly related to Sanskrit. Now we have already discussed that Sanskrit has had a very sustaining importance and influence in the formation and the evolution of Bengali. Now different kinds of Sanskritic works like Ramayana, Mahabharata were translated into Bengali when Bengali evolved as a regional language. So this speaks to the fact that Bengali was heavily influenced by Sanskritic traditions. Now this was a time when slowly the Bhakti tradition spread over different parts of the northern and the southern halves of the Indian subcontinent. Likewise, Bhakti tradition also made its way to Bengal. And when the Bhakti tradition entered Bengal, many Bhakti literature started to be written in early Bengali language. Then we come to the Geet Govinda. Geet Govinda constitute a series of poems about Lord Krishna and Radha. And this was written by a person by the name of Jayadeva. Now the eternal love theme of Radha and Krishna has been depicted numerous times in Sanskrit. So this is also another distinct influence of Sanskrit that could be found in early Bengali literature. And finally we come to the Mangal Kavyas. The Mangal Kavyas were stories about local and regional deities. And these local deities whose stories were accounted in the Mangal Kavyas also had importance in several pockets of Bengal. So can you understand how literary works which were related to Sanskrit were all founded and rooted in religious and spiritual traditions? Next we come to another body of works which were not related to Sanskrit. Here we begin the list with Nath literature. Now what is Nath literature? To talk about Nath literature, we need to know what this Nath is. Now Nath is a cult that developed in Hinduism in medieval Bengal. Now the Naths worshipped Lord Shiva as their principal deity. Now the body of Nath literature that was produced in medieval Bengal pertains to the stories of Mainamati and Gopichandra. Queen Mainamati was a disciple of Goraksanath, and she advised her son Gopichandra to renounce the worldly life by embracing and welcoming the spiritual and ascetic life that the Nathas lived. So, Nath literature was intended to spread among people ascetic and spiritual ideas. Along with that, works that were not related to Sanskrit would include folk tales, fairy tales and ballads. But from here as well we can understand that these works which were not related to Sanskrit were also very religious in nature. So irrespective of whether those were influenced by Sanskrit or not, these literary works were very religious in nature. Now we will also have to understand a very important thing in this regard. When we come to these literary works that were related to Sanskrit, it is easier for us to situate them chronologically because many of these texts have the dates written on them. While on the other hand, these works which were not related to Sanskrit are very difficult to be placed and situated chronologically because most of these were imparted and disseminated through oral traditions, because Nath literature, folk tales, fairy tales, ballads was spread among people through the oral tradition. Now in this regard, let me tell you another very important and interesting point. We learnt about how different Brahmana settlements were springing up in the western part of Bengal. So the western part of Bengal was predominantly influenced by Sanskritic traditions, while the eastern part of this region called Bengal was not as heavily influenced and inspired by Sanskritic traditions. And it is for this reason that we can also situate these works geographically. The works that were written in the western part of Bengal were mostly related to Sanskrit owing to the Sanskritic influence in this region. While on the other hand, the works which were not very related to Sanskrit were written and composed in the eastern part of Bengal. So this is another important point when we have to categorize early Bengali literature. So this now brings us to an end of our discussion where we talked about how the cultural tradition of Bengal is rooted in the Bengali language. Here we traced how Bengali as a regional language came into being after undergoing series of evolution and changes. And different languages like Sanskrit, Persian, different tribal languages and even European languages have also had their influence on the process of the evolution of Bengali. In a subsequent lesson, we will be focusing on other aspects which also constitute the cultural tradition of Bengal. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon. You can also register for free at DeltaStep.com or download the DeltaStep app to learn one-to-one with our amazing teachers or to get access to all our 5,000 plus amazing videos as per your school syllabus. Master each topic with our adaptive practice technology. Get million plus questions with step-by-step solutions and unlimited mock tests. Get all your doubts resolved instantly. Learn via games and win amazing prizes like PlayStations and iPads. So at DeltaStep, learning is not just fun and easy, it's rewarding too. So register for free now.